There are tons of great fights in Bleach, but there are also a handful of truly brutal, bloody, and often humiliating one-shot defeats as well. You know what I'm talking about. A character arrives on the scene and instantly annihilates their enemy with a single attack, hand-waving them out of existence without so much as a breath, firmly cementing themselves as a true badass for all to see. And these moments are often pretty spectacular to behold, a pure display of raw power, but also the kind of casual indifference that only a certain level of strength can buy you. In today's video, I wanted to shine the spotlight on these awesome moments and rank what I think are the 10 best one-shot defeats or one-shot victories, whatever you want to call them, in Bleach. The criterion for this video and for what I think makes a one-shot defeat like this is fairly simple. If the attacker, the person who ultimately wins the fight, defeats their opponent on their first move, that's good enough for me. For reference, let's look briefly at the subject of our last battle analysis, Aizen versus the Gotei 13 and the Vizards, for a bit of context, as I think this is an interesting example of a fight that kind of falls somewhere in the middle. While there are definitely a few one-shots in here regarding specific characters, I mean Aizen takes out basically all of the Vizards with only one hit each, as far as the fight itself goes, as a whole, Aizen is battling the group for a while before he actually finishes them all off. So for me, it wouldn't count. Before we dive into the top 10, we've got a couple of honourable mentions to go over first. As always, make sure to let me know your favourites down in the comments. So, kicking off our honourable mentions, we have poor Chad. You knew he was going to be on here somewhere. In chapter 261, after managing to defeat the Priveron Espada Gantenbane, and believing himself to now be stronger than ever, Chad is approached on the desert sands of Hueco Mundo by the 5th Espada, Neutra, who is searching for powerful enemies. Despite Gantenbane warning him to run, Chad believes he can take Neutra down in a single punch so long as he doesn't give him chance to attack, and he charges the Espada. Chad's attack seems to be successful. He lands a massive blow in Neutra's chest, but Neutra simply laughs at him before nearly splitting him in two with a single attack. The reason this one-shot is an honourable mention is because Chad does manage to get back up again for another attack, but he falls to the ground without Neutra actually needing to raise his weapon again. However, had Tesla not blocked the punch, it seems likely to me that Neutra would have struck Chad a second time. So really, I think it's only a one-shot defeat because Tesla intervenes. Sadly for Chad, this is actually the second time he's one-shot by an Espada after Yami in Karakura Town, but maybe it's just Kubo's way of paying him back for one-shotting Tatsufasa during the Soul Society arc. Our second and final honourable mention is quite a unique one-shot in the source material in that you don't see the outcome. You're merely left to assume what happens. With the Quincy's first invasion reaching its apex, Akon finally manages to break Ichigo free of the sealed Garganta. However, unfortunately for the 12th Division, they were found by a sternritter in the midst of doing so, Shaz Domino, who had been brutally attacking them while they were working to set Ichigo loose. But set him loose they did, and the moment he escapes the darkness, Ichigo launches himself at Shaz, swinging his Zanpakuto at the Quincy with a ferocity the likes of which we've never really seen from him before. It's a fantastic moment and extremely cinematic. The entire sequence plays out from a first-person perspective as we see the situation unfold through Ichigo's eyes. Before Shaz can even finish introducing himself, Ichigo smashes him with an enormous attack, causing a huge explosion in the sky. The source material never references Shaz again, and I think we were supposed to initially assume that Ichigo killed him in a single slash, pure rage pulsing through the Shinigami's veins. However, Shaz does reappear in supplementary material, so it's unclear overall. Still, this is an awesome moment, just missing out on my top 10. But kickstarting the top 10, we have Kenpachi versus Tesla, when the captain of the 11th Division arrives on the scene in Hueco Mundo to rescue the battered Ichigo and his friends. In his Resurrection, Tesla launches a massive punch at Ichigo, but Kenpachi blocks the enormous fist on his blade with ease. There's an awesome moment of build-up here, where Neutra immediately uses Pesquisa to try and detect how much power Kenpachi has, and is quickly horrified by the extraordinary strength of the captain. Tesla, however, isn't so cautious. Demanding Kenpachi tell him his name, the enormous Arrancar goes to punch Zaraki now instead. Despite Neutra screaming at him to run, a nice reversal of Chad's earlier situation, Kenpachi simply leaps into the air and cuts Tesla in half in one swing, splitting the Arrancar's body in two in a shower of blood. Glancing back at his master briefly, Tesla collapses to the ground, though he does somehow live long enough to witness Neutra's eventual death at Kenpachi's hands as well. Meanwhile, to add insult to injury, Kenpachi simply turns to Neutra without acknowledging his fraction at all, and bluntly says, "Next." It's a great moment that really embodies Kenpachi, and it's a nice bit of relief at last for the heroes who had been pummeled so badly until now. Next up, not all bankai reveals are glorious. In fact, during the Soul Society arc, more often than not, they seem to be synonymous with failure. Such is the case when Toshiro Hitsugaya activates his bankai Daiguren Hyorin Maru for the very first time in the series, against the traitorous Sosuke Aizen. Upon discovering the depths of Aizen's betrayal as the arc reaches its endgame, as well as the mortally wounded body of Hinamori, Hitsugaya flies into a rage and releases his bankai in an explosion of ice. Kubo does at least give Daiguren Hyorin Maru a chance to shine briefly. The double-page spread of its initial reveal is absolutely beautiful, and the most incredible this bankai ever looks. Now garbed in huge, icy wings, Hitsugaya stares Aizen down, snarling that he'll kill him. And what follows is one of Aizen's most iconic lines ever, as, with a cruel smile, he simply tells Hitsugaya not to make such rash threats, as it makes him look weak. Without a second thought, Hitsugaya lunges for Aizen, swinging his frosted blade, but he's instantly bested in a splatter of blood. Moving so quickly as to barely be seen, Aizen simply steps past the little captain, cutting him down in a flash. Hitsugaya crumples to the ground in disbelief, blood spurting from his body as his bankai shatters like glass around him, defeated in a single hit. Meanwhile, with Hitsugaya now lying in a pool of blood on the floor, Aizen merely comments on the beauty of the scene and how unexpectedly nice it is to see ice at this time of year. This wouldn't be the last time Aizen one-shots someone during this rampage at the end of the Soul Society arc, and it helped to set the tone for the showdown to come. The power disparity between these captains was unbelievable. Alright, coming in at number 8, the original one-shot is still one of the best. As Ichigo manages to turn the tables on Renji during their first encounter, his latent power suddenly erupting in a wild display, everything comes to a screeching halt. Just as Ichigo was getting into the rhythm of battle, his Zanpakuto is suddenly broken in half. It's a shocking moment. No one even saw Byakuya move. The captain drops the blade to the ground before drawing his own. Only the slightest motion is seen before Byakuya appears behind Ichigo, impaling through the chest and defeating him instantly. Maybe you could argue that breaking Ichigo's sword counted as Byakuya's first move. Maybe you could argue that Byakuya technically strikes Ichigo twice, though he moves so quickly, it all happens at essentially the same time. But this is so iconic, I felt it had to be here. And what really sells this moment is Ichigo's total cluelessness. Even after he's been struck, he has no idea where it came from. His mind racing, he wonders if he was hit from the back or the front, or if he was even hit at all, blood spraying from his chest. As Ichigo topples over, we get another of Bleach's best and most famous quotes, as Byakuya comments that Ichigo is slow, even to fall. The artwork here is also excellent. The shot of Ichigo buckling beside the captain emphasises just how much time seems to have slowed to a crawl before Ichigo finally does drop to the ground in a splatter of blood and rainwater. Next, we're back again with Aizen during the end of the Soul Society arc. I did say he wasn't done. With both Ichigo and Renji soundly defeated, Aizen is attacked by a surprising foe who kind of comes out of nowhere. Sajin Komamura, who drops out of the sky with an enormous crash, seething with rage at the betrayal. Lashing out at Aizen, Komamura tries to strike him with his Shikai Tenken, but Aizen merely catches it in his hand, asking what brought about Komamura's change of heart, as he wonders why he's no longer wearing his helmet. Enraged, Komamura demands an explanation from both Aizen and Tosen before deciding to activate Bankai. Suddenly, however, Aizen is directly in front of the captain, shocking Komamura. As Komamura looks up in disbelief, he sees what he thinks is Aizen still standing beside Tosen, but it's too late. Holding open his hand, Aizen activates Hado 90 Kuro Hitsugi and encases Komamura in a monolithic prison of darkness, black stakes of energy driving themselves into the side of it with incredible force. As the spell dissipates around him, Komamura crumples to the ground, instantly beaten, his body shredded from head to toe as blood sprays into the air. Although Aizen claims to have only managed a third of Black Coffin's destructive power, this is the only one shot on the list where the opponent is defeated with Kido. Okay, let's shift gears a bit and up the ante somewhat. Why take out only one opponent when you can defeat three, and in true style, I might add? After obliterating the scaffold holding Rukia, Ichigo throws her to Renji, who takes off the Gote 13, giving chase. As Omaida, Chojuro, and Isane close in, Ichigo appears immediately in front of them, ready to hold them off. Defiant, the three vice-captains all activate their Shikai, but Ichigo instantly defeats Omaida, shattering Gagetsaburi in a single hit and taking out the vice-captain, all with the same punch. Chojuro then moves to strike, but Ichigo restrains him and knocks him out in one sweeping move, sending both vice-captains flying into the air. Isane can do nothing but watch in awe as Ichigo effortlessly bests them both with a single hit each, and all without his Zanpakuto. Before she can move, Ichigo twists round and knocks Isane flying too with a quick jab to the stomach, defeating all three in an incredible display of power and skill. In a wonderful representation of how fast Ichigo is actually moving, Isane is launched backwards into the air before Omaida has even come close to hitting the ground. This is the first of what would be many badass Ichigo moments, and to this day it remains one of the best. Also, much like how the last entry was the only one to involve Kido, this is the only one shot on the list where the opponents are defeated with hand-to-hand combat. As we move now into the top 5, you didn't think we were done with the 3-for-1 specials now, did you? After the head captain Yamamoto is forced to step in against the monstrous Ion, he finally puts the beast down with a torrent of fire, incinerating the creature and turning it to ash. First of all, we should probably commend Ion. While Yamamoto is barely perturbed by the beast, it does still take the all-powerful captain a grand total of 3 hits to kill it for good in the end, which, you know, is pretty impressive on Ion's part. The same, though, can't really be said for the group of Arrancar that summoned Ion in the first place, the Tre Bestia, who, enraged upon witnessing Ion's death, all launched themselves at the Captain Commander from above. But without even sparing them a glance, Yamamoto casually swings his sword in a flaming arc above his head, immediately engulfing all 3 in a blazing inferno before they could even reach him. What makes this moment so awesome, aside from the astounding visuals, is that Yamamoto is so nonplussed by their attack that he even promises to spare their lives, merely singeing them a little out of respect for their tenacity, for the fact they chose to strike him while only having 1 arm each. And yet, despite his supposed mercy, all 3 are completely consumed by fire, streams of flame even billowing from their open mouths. All three of them, Apache, Mila Rose, and Sun Sun, drop from the sky, unable to do anything before Yamamoto's impossible might. And it was all so casual for him. A mere swing of his blade was enough to send them screaming down to the streets below. This is very similar, of course, to the scene in the first Quincy invasion where Yamamoto is jumped by 3 sternritter, Basby, Asnod, and Nanana, only for them to be instantly swept up in a massive firestorm. Honestly, you could potentially swap out these moments depending on what your favourite is, but I think the Tre Bestia one deserves it a little more for just how unbothered Yamamoto actually was here. Now, I'll be honest again, I'm not entirely sure about this one. I think it fits the bill mostly, but we just have to leave one character out of it. And of course, I'm talking about Oetsu Nemaya's complete dismantling of Yhwach's Schutzstaffel in the Royal Palace. As Yhwach summons his strongest warriors to carve out a path to the Soul King for him, the Zero Division works together to trap the Quincy, leaving them at the mercy of the Blade God Oetsu, who challenges all 4 of them at once. In one of the rawest displays of divine skill in Bleach, Oetsu quickly and effortlessly dispatches with 3 of the 4 Schutzstaffel, killing them all in one hit, as per the power of his failed Zanpakuto, Saifushi. Gerard Valkyrie misses his first swing, giving Oetsu a critical opening, and again, moving so fast that it's impossible to see his blade, Oetsu drops Gerard to the floor in one strike, a fountain of blood erupting into the air. Next up is Lil Barrow, who attempts to shoot Oetsu, but the blade's incredible sharpness means Oetsu barely needs to move, and the bullets will simply split in 2 upon the metal's edge. After Oetsu closes the distance between the 2 of them, he swings his sword upwards with a grin, taking off Lil's arm and cutting him clean in 2, killing another of the Schutzstaffel with no trouble whatsoever. And finally, as Pernida Pankajaz works up an attack, Oetsu simply buries his sword into the creature's hood, killing it instantly. So that's 3 one-shots so far, but it's only Askin Naklavar who throws this all into disarray. Oetsu twists around sharply, slicing Askin across the throat, but thanks to the Sternritter's quick thinking, he's able to survive the strike. And while Oetsu seemingly then puts him down with another slash to the neck, Askin still isn't dead, rising from the pool of blood to continue fighting. So I think for this one, we'll have to call it Oetsu versus the Schutzstaffel minus Askin. Regardless, it's a fantastic moment, made all the better by the way the anime extended the rest of the battle afterwards. As we move into the top 3, we've arrived at the truly special one-shot defeats now. Looking over this list, we featured one-shot defeats or victories from every arc of the series to date, save for one, the Lost Agent arc. But that all changes right now. After the Gotei 13 arrives to rescue Ichigo from Execution's scheme, Yukio sets up chat rooms within which battles can take place. Kenpachi, seeing Byakuya disappearing into an arena with Tsukishima, tries to intervene, believing Tsukishima to look much stronger than his opponent, but he's unable to switch out in time. Overhearing this slander, Giriko steps up to try and prove Kenpachi wrong. Believing Kenpachi to be the kind of man who only responds to force, Giriko, using his Fullbring Time Tells No Lies, transforms into a colossus, a literal Hulk, as he prepares to crush the captain with overwhelming physical strength. However, as Giriko rants on and on about his power, he's suddenly split in 2 mid-sentence. Blood shoots out of the top of his skull as a thin line runs down the entire length of his body. As he splutters in disbelief, Kenpachi simply tells him it was boring, as the Fullbringer's body gruesomely breaks in half. Honestly, I would argue this is one of the most famous one-shots in the entire series. Readers had been waiting to see the Gotei 13 for so long by this point, and Kenpachi taking out Giriko like this felt like a statement of sorts. It was immensely cathartic. It's a bit of a weird one as well though, as it is also kind of disappointing. Giriko's time tells no lies was a fascinating power, and yet he uses it here in the laziest, most boring way possible. It was also a sign of things to come. Some fans were a bit concerned that after following the arc for almost 50 chapters, the Shinigami were about to come in and just steamroll all of the villains in one go. And while that does kind of happen, none of the Fullbringers are beaten quite as badly as poor old Giriko. In the second place spot and taking home the silver medal, we have one of the most emotionally charged one-shot defeats in the series. Yamamoto versus Driscoll. After his vice-captain Chojuro Sasakibe is murdered during the Vandenrijk's introductory assault on the Soul Society, Yamamoto spirals into a furious depression, wanting nothing more than to annihilate the Quincy Empire and turn it to ash. Well, the Captain Commander gets the chance to exact some of that sweet revenge during the first invasion. Sternritter O, the overkill Driscoll Bursey, attacks the 9th Division, revealing to Hisagi that he was the one who killed Chojuro. Just as Driscoll is about to finish off Hisagi in the same way, Yamamoto arrives on the scene, deflecting the giant Quincy arrow with his bare hand. Seemingly unaware of the huge mistake he's making, Driscoll attempts to twist the knife further into the grieving head captain, revealing he stole Chojuro's bankai from him, activating it in front of Yamamoto. As Driscoll repeatedly blasts Yamamoto with lightning from the bankai, we're treated to a moving flashback of Yamamoto and Chojuro's relationship, showing the dedication Chojuro had to not only being the head captain's right-hand man, but to learning bankai as well. Driscoll berates Yamamoto for not even fighting back. Sure, Driscoll is a cookie-cutter bad guy who's barely in the series, but honestly, that's what this sequence needed. Someone totally reprehensible, someone completely unsympathetic, someone the audience isn't designed to have any kind of attachment to whatsoever, because the reader sure as hell is going to want to be fully on Yamamoto's side by the end of this. As Yamamoto stands in silence, seemingly seriously injured by the lightning blasts, he suddenly speaks. Lifting his head, Yamamoto roars that Chojuro's bankai was never this weak, and with a single strike of his Zanpakuto, he incinerates Driscoll instantly, ripping the flesh straight off the Sternritter's bones. The force of Yamamoto's rage is palpable in the very attack itself. Driscoll is reduced to a skeleton immediately, before the churning flames continue to char him even further, turning his bones to ash, his body eventually completely erased from existence. And with that, Yamamoto notes that Chojuro can finally rest. It was a surprisingly gut-wrenching moment, surprisingly humanizing for the head captain, giving us a side of Yamamoto we had never seen before, and it was so very powerful and so wonderfully cathartic to see him annihilate Driscoll like that. I think the entire reader base collectively cheered when the Sternritter was turned to dust. However, the greatest one-shot in Bleach was obvious to me from the start. There's one such defeat that is so iconic, so recognisable, that it defined a villain almost completely for a while afterwards. Of course, I'm referring to Ichigo's defeat at the hands of Aizen at the end of the Soul Society arc. Although claiming Aizen's using his hands here is being a little disingenuous. With Aizen trying to take Rukia from an injured Renji, Ichigo arrives, fresh off his incredible victory against Byakuya, still wielding his brand new Bankai Tensor Zangetsu. Ichigo blocks Aizen's attack before he and Renji come up with a scheme to try and defeat the villain. This is a huge moment for a number of reasons. It's a truly heroic arrival for Ichigo, as he comes to the aid of someone who was once his enemy earlier in the arc, leading to the two of them working together for the first time, the foundation of one of the series' strongest and most enduring friendships to come. Burying his sword into the earth, Renji uses the special ability of the broken Zabimaru Higa Zeko to raise the shattered fangs of his Shikai and send them blasting towards Aizen, taking the captain's gaze away away from Ichigo. As Renji's attack seemingly lands true, Ichigo bursts forward, rocketing towards Aizen at an incredible speed, lifting his black blade to his eyes and swinging it wildly at his foe, and then it's over. With a single finger, Aizen stops Ichigo's blade and his momentum brutally in its tracks. The horror on Ichigo's face as he realizes the true extent of Aizen's power is incredible, and with nothing more than a casual smirk on his face and a single slash, Aizen rips Ichigo apart, almost splitting the boy completely in two at the waist. What's so incredible about this scene is the way it completely upends expectation. Sure, maybe it's too early in the story for Ichigo and Renji to actually defeat Aizen, but everything was lining up, everything was being set up, all the tropes pointed towards the two of them at least achieving some kind of small victory here, some kind of well-earned, hard-fought win. But for Aizen to stop Ichigo so easily, and crucially with the absolute minimal amount of effort, was insanity, and it remains one of Bleach's most iconic moments to this day. It helps too that the anime elevated this scene even further in a really smart way. As Ichigo flies towards Aizen, capitalizing on his one opening, Ichigo's theme song number 1 blares in the background, synonymous of course with Ichigo's best, most triumphant moments. In a wonderfully smart reality check, the song cuts off the moment Aizen stops Ichigo's blade with his finger, signalling a stark and violent end to Ichigo's heroic efforts. This moment, this one-shot defeat of Ichigo, served to showcase how completely unstoppable Aizen was at this moment, and how hopelessly outmatched our heroes actually were, setting up Aizen's entire tenure to come as the main villain of the series. But that's it for the video, guys. As always, I really hope you enjoyed it. I apologise if my voice has sounded weird throughout. I'm ill once again, which is very frustrating, but it is what it is. As always, let me know your thoughts down in the comments below. What's your favourite one-shot victory, defeat, whatever you want to call it, in Bleach? Is your list similar to mine? Would you change anything? I'd love to know down in the comments. There were still a few one-shots in the series that didn't make it onto this list at all, so maybe yours looks quite a bit different. I'd love to know, so do please let me know. And as always, I want to end this video by saying an enormous thank you and giving a huge shout out to my supporters over on Patreon. I really do appreciate each and every one of you so very much. It means the absolute world to me. If you want to support me, if you like what I do here over on YouTube, you can do just that over on Patreon to get your name in the credits like this, and to get every single video completely ad-free. But that's it from me, guys. Until next time, I'll catch you later, and I'll see you then.